Batman is the greatest franchise of all time. Of all time. And the reason for that is that Batman managed to revolutionize almost every piece of media that we have. Almost any kind of art. I think that the only thing that is comparable to the scope of Batman is actually the Mario franchise, because they managed to release a successful game in almost every single style of gameplay. They have 2D platformers, 3D platformers, RPGs, racing games, party games, RPGs, real-time strategy, soccer, golf, tennis, RPGs. The only genres that Mario's missing is a cooking game, a dating sim, or an FPS. It doesn't come close to the scope that Batman had in our culture. It's not just making a really good piece of art, it's creating a black hole that gravitates everything around it. Batman has changed so much of our culture, and speaking as someone that was born in the 90s, I was there to see it. But first I should probably mention that there are some things that Batman hasn't revolutionized yet. I am not saying that there aren't Batman books. And I'm not saying that they're not good. It's just not revolutionary. I'm not even asking for, I don't know, a masterpiece that will be studied in colleges for the rest of time. I would be satisfied with Marley and Me or Twilight level of influence, but I don't think there is. I would say that it's very clear that there isn't one and there will never be, because Batman and superheroes in general are a very visual medium, but I've been proven wrong. Let's see the rest of the list. Obviously, Batman has really famous music. The scores for the movies, for the TV series, the na 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 Batman. Yeah, so music is very important in Batman, maybe even revolutionized it. But I'm not going to count this because most of the music that I associate with Batman are from other stuff, like the cartoons, the movies. So I think Batman needs an outlet for music, exclusively for music, or at least with music taking a very central part, like making a Broadway show or a concept album, Uncle Scrooge has one, so how hard could it be? If you are a composer, a singer, and want to add to the Batman legacy in some way, there's a pretty good niche to try. Batman has not affected Broadway yet. Now that we got that aside, let's talk about the things that Batman did influence. This one comes as no surprise at all. I don't even know why I'm talking about it. Batman is one of the most sold out comics in the world, if not the most sold comic. Trying to say that Batman didn't revolutionize comics would be ridiculous. But if you're going to actually name names and point fingers, I would have to talk about the Killing Joke and Batman Returns. These were so very influential in what we call the dark age of comic books, and everything was dark and violent, etc. Bomber Guy did a pretty good video about it. I do recommend checking it out. But Batman is a very flexible franchise. You can go either the dark way or the lighter way, such as Batman 66, baby! I cannot say for sure what kind of changes it brought to the medium that is live action TV, but I can say that it did influence a lot in the world's perception of superheroes. I think that only went away with the Iron Man movies, maybe Batman Begins. If you weren't, say, born yet, let me give you a refresher. Batman 66 had a lot of silly outfits and had a lot of jokes. The costumes were silly and there were a lot of words for punching, I don't know the name of those in English. And for a very long time, that was the tone that was being followed by everyone. Everyone thought that superheroes were crazy and were funny. Every time that a superhero movie came out, we would get surprised by how dark it is or whatever, because we had that image in our heads. Do you guys think that the Marvel bubble is going to pop? Because if it does, we might have a renaissance of Batman 66-like movies. Because that would be great, I love it. I love Batman 66. When we talk Batman, what kind of Batman comes to your mind? Because depending on how old you are, it might be the actual cartoon. Batman, the animated series, it was a great piece of work. I highly recommend it. It got so popular that actually got a spot in prime time, even though that didn't last very long. The cartoon actually led to a whole cinematic universe because you got the Justice League and you got the Superman. It was a show that really did show how dark and how interesting superhero things can be like, and adults could also enjoy it. It created new characters, revamped old characters, and just was generally a blast. Not only did it influence cartoons, but the voice cast was so iconic in the show that they are seen as the de facto Batman actors, like Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill. Everyone keeps saying, oh, they're the best Batman, they're the best Joker, and they still keep popping up in other appearances as well. So I'm going to finish this by saying that if you want to introduce some of your friends to the Batman cosmos, I think that this is the best gateway entry because you don't need to read hundreds of comics for you to understand what's going on. But first thing you need to do is have a pre-selection of the best episodes because there are some that are not that good, and then you show to your friend and you wait for them to have some kind of obsession with one of the villains. That's the Laura guarantee. Oh boy, this one makes me sad. It really does, because I love The Dark Knight, and I know that you love The Dark Knight, who doesn't? And it's sad because you got something so good that everyone just completely misunderstood why it was so good. You have so many cliches that come from this movie, like the main villain being completely insane, also he gets locked up at some point in the movie, and everything's so dark.
No right or wrong, no heroes or villains, only darkness. There is one man who can fight the darkness.
Yeah, here we go, baby!
With more darkness.
What's this now?
But that being said, Dark Knight really is a really good movie, and if I were to say a few words on why I think it's so good, I think it's because it's very iconic. Well, not iconic, now the young folk, they say mimetic. But seriously, go watch this movie and drink a shot every time that the movie has a meme that you've seen online. Why so serious? Wanna know how I got these cars? Kid was playing with tangerine. It's iconic. It's great. I think that this is something that the modern movies are completely missing, because here's the thing. The entire movie without the Joker is just a mafia movie. It's kind of boring. But when you get the Joker in, he's so ridiculous that it actually balances it out. It's not, some miserable Marvel shit, and it's not Batman 66, because they are in perfect balance. So I think that the biggest lesson with the Dark Knight that we all were supposed to learn, but we didn't, is go big or go home. Do not abandon the craziness of comic books. Just bring them to a context in which they would be horrifying. And for the love of God, don't put your flamboyant villain in some fucking plastic bag with holes for eyes. It's stupid, it's ridiculous, don't do that. Do you remember what gaming used to be like in the 2000s? If you weren't, say, born yet, here's a refresher. Games were not as respected as a medium they were today. They were simply seen as toys. And blogs on the internet that were about games, at least in Brazil, they focus more on Nintendo games. Nowadays you have stuff like The Last of Us show that shows that we really come to respect video games a lot more. It was much more rare to release games that didn't have any tie-in with any products. Games were seen by the manufacturers, by the corporations, as something to tack on to a product that already existed. Say, you wouldn't go to the store and buy Hogwarts Legacy. You would go to the store and buy the Harry Potter game based on the movie. But everything changed when Batman Arkham Asylum came out. Something that is based on an existing IP, but it has its own story. It really shown that people can feel like Batman. This is a game that still influences the gaming sphere to this day. There are so many games that have taken inspiration on Batman Arkham Asylum's fantastic combat and stealth system. But since I've already talked about the franchise in the past, I'm just going to give a short Riddlerless review. Arkham Asylum is absolutely really good. I wouldn't go as far to say that you should play Arkham Asylum if you don't like video games, because this is a very video game. But if you do like video games, I do think that you will enjoy Batman Arkham, because it has, as I have previously said, a mix of gameplay and exploration that you can explore however you want. And if you like that, then you should totally play Arkham City, because it's better. It has a more of an open world, and it has better boss fights. And only play the other two games if you really loved Arkham City and want more of that, or if you got obsessed with a Batman villain and you want to spend 4 months of your life picking his litter. It's going to be a little bit awkward because I don't like podcasts. I'm not a listener kind of person. I'm much more visual. I tried to listen to Batman Unburied and it didn't go very well. For several reasons. I don't like the voice acting that people do on this podcast, because it feels so forced, like they are saying their lines isolated in a microphone booth, because I mean they are. I also don't have a lot of attention span, so if I suddenly blank out and stop paying attention, it's much harder to rewind and go back to the place that I was. I was actually reading the transcript of the podcast while I was listening to it, but then I said, well, if I'm not going to enjoy this, why am I even reading this? You know, I should probably be careful to enjoy it in the way that the creators intended. Maybe this is kind of insulting. But the neat thing about this list is that I don't have to experience everything that I put on it. I just say that it was revolutionary, and I think it was. I mean, I don't like podcasts, and I still ended up hearing about it. There was actually ads on the subway, and they really brought their A game in the marketing. And since it got popular enough and famous enough to get a second season, I am going to assume that it's going to influence other creators. I wondered why Marvel hasn't done a podcast yet, but then I realized that hearing Marvel superheroes doing one quip-liners for hours would be my definition of hell. So it's because of these works that Batman has become such a tight grip in our culture, and even if you don't like Batman, you're gonna have to deal with him at some point. You need to understand the Bat for you to understand what came after the Bat. And this is why I'm making so many videos on Batman, by the way, because there's just so much to explore. Like, almost 100 years of Batman. And superhero, a character with a lot of influence, a lot of personality, and there's not a single doubt of why people like him. So even if you don't like Batman, I do recommend you taking a look at this stuff, because it might be important for you. If you, for example, you're into movies, you gotta have to talk about the Dark Knight someday. If you're video games, you gotta talk about the Batman game someday. So I hope that this list isn't just a celebration of Batman's legacy, and it actually helps you discover new Batman stuff that you might have previously overlooked.